The rich Toque paid big money to cure his sons, but it was the housekeeper who found out the truth. Don Javier Serrano's $3,000 Italian leather briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the marble floor with a loud thud, but he didn't even blink. His eyes were fixed on a scene. His brain, sharp from ruthless business in Spain and Mexico, just couldn't process. In front of him, right in the middle of the spotless living room that usually smelled of disinfectant and quiet, his sons, Hugo and Mateo, were standing. The same boys whom the best specialists from Zurich and Houston said had progressive muscular atrophy that would land them in wheelchairs before they turned 5. The same boys Javier barely dared to touch for fear of breaking them. Now, clad in tiny sky blue doctor scrubs, the twins moved with a clumsy but undeniable agility around a figure lying flat on the emerald green carpet. "Dr. Hugo, the patient is losing her rhythm," shouted little Mateo with a clear, strong voice, a voice Javier hadn't heard properly in months. On the floor, face down, was Lucia, the new cleaning lady. She wore her crisp blue uniform, but what stood out violently was those bright yellow rubber gloves she still had on. She was motionless, pretending to be a critically ill patient, while the twins placed a toy stethoscope on her back, roaring with laughter. Hugo, the frailer of the two, lifted an arm and, without leaning on anything, took 2 solid steps towards Lucia's head to check her reflexes. 2 steps without a walking frame, without a nurse holding him, without any heavy breathing. Javier's blood froze and then boiled in a split second. The image clashed brutally with the reality of his monthly €50,000 medical bills. If his boys could move like that, what had he been paying for these past 2 years? But paternal fear overpowered financial logic. Panic blinded him. He saw Hugo wobble slightly from laughing, and his mind pictured a fatal fall. "Get away from her right now!" Javier's shout echoed off the double-height walls like a cannon blast. The magical scene shattered into 1,000 pieces. The twins jumped violently. Little Hugo, scared by his father's roar, lost his balance and landed sitting on the carpet, instantly breaking into tears. Lucia, who had been a smiling statue until then, got up with feline speed, pivoting on her knees to instinctively shield the boys, placing her humble body and her cleaning gloves between the master and the father's fury. "Mr. Serrano," she exclaimed, eyes wide, but still holding onto Mateo's hand, which was clutching the starchiness of her uniform. Javier crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hard-soled shoes sounding like sentencing hammer blows. He ignored Lucia. He knelt in front of Hugo, checking his legs with trembling hands, searching for fractures, searching for the damage doctors assured him would happen with the slightest physical exertion. "You hurt, huh? You break anything?" Javier asked, his voice cracking with anguish, touching the boy's knees. Hugo didn't answer, just cried and pointed at Lucia. "We were playing, Papa. We were curing the blue girl," Mateo sobbed, trying to push his father's hands away from his brother. Javier looked up. His dark eyes, usually cold and calculating, were bloodshot, with a mix of terror and pure rage. He locked his gaze onto Lucia, who remained on the floor, breathing heavily. "I pay you to wipe dust, not to kill my boys," Javier hissed in a tone so low and dangerous it was worse than his shouting. "I gave you clear instructions. Nobody touches the boys. Nobody lifts them from their chairs without certified medical supervision. You could have left them crippled forever, sir." "With all respect," Lucia started. Her voice shook, but her chin was high, defiant. "Your sons are not going to break. They need to move. They have been asking me to play when the nurse off duty for weeks." "When the nurse is off duty," Javier stood up, towering over her like a dark tower. "Are you doing this behind Olga's back, behind the medical team I hired? Because that medical team has them tied down." Lucia also stood up. She was small compared to him, but indignation gave her stature. "Look at them, Mr. Serrano. Look at them. Hugo just walked to me." Mateo was jumping. "When was the last time your medicine achieved that?" Javier looked at his sons. Hugo had stopped crying and now looked at Lucia with adoration. It was impossible. It was medically impossible. According to the reports on his desk, the cognitive dissonance gave him vertigo. Either his doctors were lying, or this woman was an irresponsible witch who was lucky not to have caused a tragedy today. And Javier Serrano didn't believe in luck. He believed in experts. "You're fired?" Javier said, regaining his executive cold mask. "You have 5 minutes to pack your rags and get out of my house before I call security and report you for criminal negligence." "You can't do that," Lucia said, taking a step towards him, forgetting her place. "If I go, they will go back to sleep." Subscribe now if you want to know what secret those yellow gloves hide and why the millionaire will regret this decision in less than 24 hours. Javier pointed a stiff finger towards the door. Out. Just then, the sound of orthopedic heels echoed down the hallway. Nurse Olga, a sturdy 50-year-old woman with a perpetually stern expression and an immaculate white uniform, entered the room carrying a silver tray. On the tray were 2 syringes with a thick amber liquid, the afternoon medicine. "Good heavens," Olga exclaimed, dropping the tray onto an auxiliary table with a calculated clatter. "Mr. Serrano," I heard shouting. "What happened?" "The boys." Olga rushed to the twins with theatrical efficiency, pulling an oximeter from her pocket and placing it on Hugo's finger before the child could protest. "They are tachycardic," Olga announced gravely, looking at the small digital screen. "Elevated heart rate, sweating. Sir, I warned you that unqualified staff must not interact with patients. Stress can accelerate muscle degeneration." Javier felt the weight of guilt crushing his shoulders. Olga was the best nurse in town, recommended by the private hospital director himself. She looked after the boys 24/7. If she said they were in danger, it was true. "I have already taken care of it, Olga," Javier said, without looking at Lucia. "Miss is definitely leaving." Lucia watched the scene with a nauseous feeling in her stomach. She saw how the boys, who a minute ago were laughing and jumping full of life, shrank before the nurse's presence. She saw how the light in Mateo's eyes dimmed upon seeing the syringe on the table. "They are not stressed from playing," Lucia intervened, her voice gaining strength as she slowly removed her yellow gloves, one by one, with a deliberate snap. "They are scared of you, Olga." The nurse turned slowly with a condescending smile that didn't reach her cold eyes. "Poor thing," Olga said, addressing Javier but looking at Lucia. "It's common for domestic help to get attached and confuse nervous excitement with improvement. It's the placebo effect of the ignorant, Mr. Serrano. She thinks playing cures genetic diseases. It's sweet but dangerous. It's not placebo." Lucia threw the gloves onto the white leather sofa, an unthinkable gesture of rebellion. "Those boys have muscles. They have strength. What they don't have is energy, because you keep them drugged." The silence that followed was absolute. Javier looked at Lucia, stunned by the audacity of the accusation. "Watch what you say," Javier warned, moving closer to her. "You are accusing a healthcare professional of malpractice. That is defamation." "I am accusing this woman of sedating your children so she doesn't have to look after them," Lucia snapped, pointing at the syringes. "I clean their rooms, sir. I've seen them sleep 18 hours a day. I've seen that when you are not around." She doesn't even look at them. She spends the day on the phone while they stare at the ceiling. Today, when she went out for her 3-hour break, the boys came alive. "They are not sick in the muscles, Mr. Serrano. They are intoxicated." Olga's face turned red, but not from shame, but from contained anger. "This is outrageous," Olga shrieked. "I've been looking after terminal cases for 20 years, Mr. Serrano. Are you going to let this mop insult my reputation and that of the doctors who signed the diagnosis? The boys need their medicine now. We are late already, and look how agitated they are. If not, I'll give it to them now. They could suffer painful spasms tonight." Javier looked at the syringes. He looked at his sons, who were now crying silently, resigned. He looked at Lucia, who was looking at him with desperate pleading in her brown eyes. Javier's logic, the businessman's logic, intervened. He had medical reports. He had x-rays. He had the word of doctors with PhDs. And on the other side, he had a 23-year-old girl who hadn't even finished secondary school, whose only merit was making the children laugh. The choice seemed obvious. And yet, the image of Hugo walking that image was tattooed on his retina. "Olga, give the boys their medicine and take them to their room," Javier ordered, his voice tired, rubbing his temples. "No," Lucia screamed, trying to lunge towards the table, but Javier intercepted her, gripping her arm firmly. "Enough," he said. His grip was strong, but not violent. It was the grip of a man closing a failed deal. "I'll pay you for the full month, but you leave now. And if I ever see you near this property or my sons again, I assure you, you won't even get a job wiping pavements in this country." Lucia felt tears sting her eyes. Not for herself, not for the dismissal, but for Mateo, who was stretching his hand out to her as Olga gently dragged him towards the hallway. "Bye-bye, blue girl," the boy whispered before the nurse closed the living room door, taking the light out of the house with them. Javier let go of Lucia's arm. "Go!" Lucia took a deep breath. She knew she had lost the battle, but the war for those boys couldn't end like this. She bent down to pick up her things. As she picked up her bag, her gaze fell on the yellow gloves she had thrown on the sofa. In a swift movement, While Javier turned to pour himself a drink of whiskey to calm his nerves, Lucia grabbed the gloves. But not just the gloves. Her hand, quick from years of manual labor, slipped towards the auxiliary table where Olga had left the tray for a second before taking it. There was a small empty glass vial next to the syringes, the vial from which Olga had extracted the liquid. Nobody would notice an empty bottle. It was rubbish. Lucia slipped it inside the thumb of the left glove and crumpled the glove in her fist. "I'm leaving, Mr. Serrano," Lucia said, walking towards the main door. She paused for a second under the entrance arch with the rain battering the glass behind her. "But I leave you one free question, not like your doctor's advice. If your sons are so sick, why does the nurse keep the medicine bottles in her personal bag and not in the house's first aid kit?" Javier stopped with the glass halfway to his mouth. The amber liquid of the whiskey trembled. "What did you say?" "Check the kitchen cameras, sir, from today at 2 p.m. Just before preparing the tray, Lucia opened the heavy door and stepped out into the storm. The cold wind hit her, but she clutched the yellow glove against her chest. She had the evidence. Now, she just needed someone to believe her. Inside the mansion, Javier stood staring at the closed door. Silence had returned, that hospital silence he hated so much. He checked his watch. It was 5:15 p.m. Olga said she prepared the medicine just minutes ago. Check the cameras. Javier placed the glass on the table with a loud thud. He didn't want to believe the cleaner. He hated it when a stranger questioned his controlled world. But if there was one thing Javier Serrano hated more than disorder, it was being made a fool of. He pulled out his mobile phone and opened the security app. He selected Camera Kitchen 14 Sur Tesores. What he saw on the small screen of his cell phone made the whiskey glass finally fall to the floor and shatter. Olga was not taking the medicine from the special fridge. She was pouring something from an unlabeled plastic bottle she took from her own bag, mixing it with orange juice. Javier felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He ran to the stairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. He had to stop that injection, but when he reached the upstairs hallway, he heard the most terrifying sound in the world. Absolute silence. No crying, no laughter. He burst open the door to the boys' room. Olga was there, putting away the empty syringes. The twins were in their beds with glassy eyes, staring into nothingness, drooling slightly. "They are sleeping now, sir," Olga whispered, placing a finger on her lips with macabre sweetness. "The angels need their rest." Javier looked at his sons, then at the nurse, and for the first time in his life, he felt the primitive urge of a predator discovering a threat in its nest. But he couldn't act without proof. Not yet. He needed to know what the heck was in that syringe, and the only person who had a clue had just been thrown out into the rain. Javier stood by his sons' beds, motionless as a salt statue in the dim light of the room. The only sound was the rhythmic, almost imperceptible hum of the hospital-grade air purifier and the heavy, almost artificial breathing of Hugo and Mateo. Just an hour ago, those same boys were laughing. An hour ago, they had color in their cheeks and a spark of mischief in their eyes that Javier hadn't seen since they learned to crawl. Now, under the effect of Olga's medicine, they looked like broken porcelain dolls, pale and disconnected from the world. Guilt hit Javier in the chest with the force of a sledgehammer. He approached Hugo and grazed the boy's forehead with the back of his hand. It was cold, damp. This wasn't the restorative sleep of a boy tired from playing. It was the chemical stupor of a sedated patient. How had it come to this? His mind, usually sharp in detecting fraud in multi-million-dollar contracts, traveled to the past, to the day that marked the beginning of his personal nightmare. Zurich, 2 years ago, the most expensive clinic in Europe. A doctor with 3 international awards showed him X-rays Javier didn't understand and told him in a soft, professional voice, a typical muscular dystrophy with rapid progression. "Prepare for the worst, Mr. Serrano. Your muscles will simply forget how to function." Javier had accepted the diagnosis as a divine sentence. Who was he to question science? If money could buy a solution, he would pay it, and he did. He turned his mansion into a sterile fortress. He hired Olga, the best geriatric and pediatric nurse, paying her triple the market salary to ensure absolute loyalty. He bought ergonomic wheelchairs imported from Japan that cost more than a sports car, also his sons would be comfortable while they withered away. And then, Lucia arrived. Javier closed his eyes, clenching his fists. Lucia was not part of the medical plan. She was an administrative mistake, a gap to fill when the previous cleaner retired. He remembered the interview 5 minutes in the lobby. She was 23. She came from a forgotten village and needed the money to send for her sick mother. Javier barely looked her in the face. All he cared about was that she had a clean criminal record and knew how to use the hypoallergenic products required by the house protocol. Be invisible, he had told her that first day. The boys are fragile. Don't make noise, don't raise dust, and above all, don't bother them. Lucia had obeyed, or so he thought. She became invisible, a shadow in a blue uniform that left the windows spotless and the floors shining. But Javier, blinded by his pain and his busy schedule, didn't see what was really happening. He didn't see that for Hugo and Mateo. That invisible girl was the only real thing in their plastic world. Doctors came in with white coats, cold needles, and serious faces. Olga came in with bitter syrups and constant prohibitions. Don't run, don't move, you'll get tired. They were the jailers. But Lucia came in with music. Now, looking at his sleeping sons, Javier understood the detail that had escaped him in the living room scene. The yellow gloves, those loud rubber gloves, ridiculous for a minimalist designer mansion. To Javier, they were cleaning tools. To the boys, those gloves were characters. They were puppets. They were the magic hands that tickled, that clapped, that challenged them to reach the unreachable. Javier looked towards the closed door of the bedroom bathroom. Olga was in there humming while tidying up the medicines. The rage Javier felt was so intense that he had to grab the crib railing to keep himself from going in and strangling her right there. But the cold logic returned to him. Lucia had told him to check the cameras. If your sons are so sick. The cleaner's phrase echoed in his head like an alarm bell. Javier left the boys' room with silent steps, like a ghost in his own house. He passed by Olga, who was coming out of the bathroom. "I'm going to the study to work," he said without looking at her. His voice sounded dead, perfect, so as not to raise suspicion. "Rest, Mr. Serrano. The angels are in good hands," Olga replied with that sickly sweet smile that now looked like a diabolical grimace to him. Javier went downstairs, crossed the main living room where his dropped briefcase still lay, and entered his private study. He closed the door and locked it. He walked to the bookshelf, moved a fake volume of art history, and revealed the hidden panel. He dialed the code. The wall slid open smoothly, revealing the security room. It was a technological bunker. 12 high-definition monitors flickered in the darkness, showing every corner of the property in real time. But Javier wasn't interested in the present. He was interested in the past. He sat in the leather ergonomic chair. His hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. System, access recording archive. Camera, main living room. Date, last 7 days. The system processed the order. Javier took a deep breath. He was about to see the truth he had ignored for months. He was about to see if he had been his son's savior or their unwitting executioner. The bluish light of the monitors illuminated Javier's tense face, highlighting the deep dark circles under his eyes. On the central screen, the video began to play. The date marked Tuesday, 10 a.m. The image was sharp, 8K quality. The living room was bathed in morning sunlight. The twins appeared in the frame, sitting in their high-tech wheelchairs with their heads bowed, bored. In the background, Olga could be seen sitting on the sofa with her feet on the coffee table, something strictly forbidden, talking animatedly on her mobile phone, completely ignoring the boys. Javier clenched his jaw. He paid that woman to stimulate them, to look after them, and she treated them like furniture. Then the side door opened. Lucia walked in. She was carrying the mop bucket, and of course, the yellow gloves. The moment the boys saw her, their heads shot up. It was as if someone had flipped a switch inside them. On the screen, Lucia put down the bucket, glanced towards where Olga was, who didn't even flinch, and then winked at the twins. Lucia started cleaning the large window overlooking the garden, but she wasn't cleaning normally. She made wide, exaggerated, rhythmic movements. She started to dance. Javier brought his face closer to the screen, fascinated and horrified at the same time. Lucia, the humble girl in the service uniform, transformed. She did a perfect ballet pirouette, spinning on one leg while wiping the highest part of the glass. Then she dropped into a deep squat, cleaning the lower part with grace. And then the miracle happened. Mateo, the twin whose legs the doctors said were the weakest, started imitating her from his chair. He raised his arms, copying the movement of wiping the sky. Hugo did the same. They were laughing. You could see it on their faces even though the audio was low. Lucia turned towards them. Instead of scolding them or treating them with pity, she put her hands on her hips, bright yellow hands, and gave them a look of challenge. It seemed to say, "Is that all you got?" Javier watched as Lucia approached them and offered her hands. She didn't lift them. She didn't carry them like sacks of potatoes, which is what Olga and the therapist did. She simply offered her hands for support and waited. She waited with infinite patience. In the video, Hugo grabbed the yellow gloves, tensed his arms, his little face turning red with effort, and then he pushed. His legs, those legs that supposedly didn't work, tensed up. The muscles in his calves stood out. "Come on, son, you can do it," Javier whispered, in the solitude of the security room, tears streaming down his cheeks, talking to a recording from 3 days ago. And Hugo stood up, stood on his feet, stumbling. Yes, weak, yes, but standing. Lucia didn't let go, but she didn't fully hold him either. She let him feel his own weight, and then she started taking small steps backward, dancing softly, inviting him to follow her. Hugo took one step, then another. Javier. A broken, guttural sound escaped his throat. He had spent millions in Swiss clinics to be told it was impossible, and a cleaner armed with love and a pair of supermarket gloves had achieved the impossible in his living room. But the video continued, and the wonder turned to horror. The recording jumped to Wednesday, 2:30 p.m., medication time. The kitchen camera showed Olga alone. Javier zoomed in. The nurse took out of her personal bag, a designer bag Javier had gifted her for Christmas, a reused mineral water bottle containing a clear liquid. It was not the prescribed medicine. It had no pharmacy labels. Olga looked around with the cunning of someone who does wrong out of routine and poured a generous amount of the mysterious liquid into the boy's orange juice. She shook the glasses and smiled. A cold, calculating smile. Javier felt like he was going to vomit. He rewound and watched the scene again. And again the casualness with which she poisoned her sons was chilling. Then he switched to the living room camera. 10 minutes after that scene in the kitchen, the boys, who had been playing on the floor thanks to Lucia's secret morning therapy, drank the juice Olga brought them. 5 minutes later, the effect was devastating. On the screen, Javier watched as the energy left his sons' bodies. Hugo, who was trying to build a block tower, dropped the pieces. His eyelids closed. His body slumped softly onto the carpet. Mateo followed seconds later. Olga entered the frame, looked at them with disdain, roughly picked them up, and deposited them in their chairs as if they were broken dolls. Then she sat on the sofa and returned to her phone. She was drugging them, Javier whispered, the realization hitting him like a concrete slab. She kept them invalid so I would keep paying, so her job would be easy. It was a business. The boy's illness was a chemically maintained lie, and he, Javier Serrano, the great businessman, had financed the torture of his own blood. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was remembering what he had done an hour ago. He had thrown out the only person who knew. He had humiliated and fired the only person who had managed to make Hugo walk, the only one who didn't see them as patients, but as children. Lucia. She had the sample. She had the truth in that yellow glove, and he had sent her out into a torrential storm, accusing her of theft, while the real criminal slept under his roof. Javier jumped up from the chair, knocking it to the floor. There was no time for the police. Not yet. He first had to get Lucia back. He had to apologize on his knees if necessary, because if she disappeared, if she threw away that glove, or decided never to return, he would lose the only proof, and what was worse, he would lose the only real cure his sons had ever known. He looked at one of the external monitors. The rain was falling violently over the city. It was night. Lucia had left on foot. Javier ran out of the security room, pulling the keys to his sports car from his pocket. He didn't call the chauffeur. He had to do this himself. As he passed the lobby, he saw his reflection in a mirror. He saw a man in a $3,000 suit, but with the broken face of a desperate father. "I'm coming for you, Lucia," he growled, opening the main door and launching himself into the storm. "Please, don't have gone far." The car engine roared, breaking the silence of the rich neighborhood as Javier sped into the darkness, praying for the first time in years that it wasn't too late. But as he rushed towards the exit of the estate, in the room upstairs, Hugo's vital signs monitor began to beep irregularly. Today's dose, mixed with the stress of Lucia's dismissal, had been too strong. The small red alarm light started to flash silently, while Olga slept in the next room, dreaming of her next monthly bonus. The rain fell like icy knives on Lucia's back, soaking her blue uniform until it clung to her skin like a second layer of shame. She walked along the edge of the dark road, connecting the exclusive estate, the top, with the rest of the city. She had no umbrella, no coat, just her old bag slung across her chest and clutched in her right hand, inside her pocket, the yellow rubber glove with the proof of the crime. Every step she took away from the mansion was a pang in her heart. She wasn't crying from the cold or from losing the job that paid for her mother's medicine. She was crying because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Mateo's face with that innocent smile telling her, "Bye-bye, blue girl." She knew that at that moment, as she walked in the storm, the woman calling herself a nurse was turning off the light of those boys. "I have to go to the police," Lucia murmured, shivering, her teeth chattering. But who will they believe? The fired maid or the millionaire's certified nurse? A few kilometers back, at the Serrano mansion, the deathly silence was broken. It wasn't a human scream. It was technology. Hugo's heart monitor, which had started with an irregular beep, now emitted a continuous and shrill alarm. Beep. In the adjacent room, Olga woke up with a start. She had fallen asleep watching a series on her tablet with headphones on. She ripped off her headphones and heard the alarm. Her heart leaped, not out of maternal concern, but out of pure survival calculation. She ran to the boys' room. The scene was terrifying. Hugo was arched on the bed, his little body rigid in the middle of a silent seizure. His lips, once pink, now had a bluish-purple tint. Beside him, Matteo was breathing with horrifying difficulty, as if there were an invisible weight on his chest, making a gurgling sound with every inhalation. "Damn it!" Olga screamed, her face contorted with panic. "The dose. I messed up the mixture." Olga looked at the mineral water bottle she used to hide the muscle relaxant. It was almost empty. In her haste and rage from the argument with the maid, she had poured triple the usual amount into the juice. Not only had she sedated them, she had caused imminent respiratory arrest. Her cold, malicious mind worked at 1,000 kilometers per hour. If she called for an ambulance, they would do tests. If they did tests, they would find the forbidden muscle relaxant in lethal doses. She would go to jail for years, lose her license, her reputation, her money, unless there was a scapegoat. Olga ran to the house's landline and dialed the emergency number, feigning hysterical, crying even before they answered. "Ambulance! I need an ambulance! Urgent at the Serrano mansion!" she shrieked, slightly tearing her white coat to look disheveled and distressed. "My patients. I think they have been poisoned." The domestic helper. She gave them something before she left. She hung up and immediately dialed Javier's number. Meanwhile, on the wet road, the dazzling headlights of a sports car cut through the darkness. Javier was driving with white knuckles on the steering wheel, ignoring the speed limits. His eyes scanned the pavement, looking for Lucia's small figure. The rain was so dense he could barely see 2 meters ahead, but he knew she couldn't have gone far. Then, his phone, connected to the car's audio system, exploded with Olga's ringtone. Javier answered with fear stuck in his throat. "Yes, Mr. Serrano." Olga's voice filled the car cabin, distorted by faint screaming. "Come back. They are dying. Hugo and Matteo are dying." Javier felt the car skid on the wet asphalt. The world stopped. "What is it?" Javier roared. "I just left. They are convulsing," Olga cried. "It's that woman, Lucia. I found a blue powder on the floor. She gave them something. She poisoned them for revenge because you fired her. The ambulance is on its way." The lie was perfect, brutal. Javier felt a sharp doubt for a millisecond. What if Olga was right and Lucia was crazy? But then he remembered the video. He remembered Lucia dancing. He remembered Olga pouring the liquid from the unlabeled bottle. "I'm coming," Javier said and hung up. But he didn't turn around. He floored the accelerator, but not towards the house. He kept going forward because a few meters ahead, under the light of a flickering street lamp, he saw a huddled figure walking against the wind. Javier slammed the brakes on the sports car with a controlled skid, blocking Lucia's path. Lucia stopped, terrified, shielding her eyes from the blinding light. She thought it was the police or Javier coming to finish humiliating her. The driver's door opened upwards. Javier got out into the rain without caring about his $3,000 suit and ran towards her. Lucia backed away, pressing her back against the road's safety railing. "I didn't steal anything," she shouted, pulling the yellow glove from her pocket like a shield. "I have the proof right here." Javier didn't attack her. He stopped half a meter away, soaked, his hair stuck to his forehead, with an expression Lucia never expected to see on a millionaire's face. Absolute despair. "Get in the car," Javier said. His voice wasn't an order, it was a plea. "No, you kicked me out," Lucia stammered, trembling. "Hugo is dying," Javier shouted, and his voice broke into a sob. "Olga just called me. She says they are convulsing." Lucia felt her legs fail. The cold disappeared, replaced by a fire of adrenaline. "The overdose," she whispered. "She gave him too much." "She says it was you," Javier said, looking her in the eyes, searching for the final truth. "She says you poisoned them." Lucia took a step forward, grabbing the lapels of Javier's wetsuit with surprising strength. "You saw how I looked at them. You know I would give my life for those boys." She yelled at him in the rain. She is killing them to cover up her mistake. Take me to them. I know what they took. Javier nodded once. He took her hand, a cold, hard-working hand between his own, soft and pampered, and dragged her towards the car. Come on. If they die, we all die today. The sports car's engine roared like a wounded beast as Javier executed a forbidden U-turn, burning rubber on the wet asphalt. The car shot back towards the mansion, devouring the road at 180 kilometers per hour. Inside, the silence was tense. Lucia was pressed against the leather seat, clutching the yellow glove against her chest like a rosary. Javier drove with one hand and frantically dialed on his mobile with the other. Who are you calling? Lucia asked, looking at the car's GPS screen. The director of the central hospital. He's a friend of mine. I need him to prepare the toxicology unit, Javier replied, his jaw tight. The ambulance should be arriving at the house by now. We are not waiting there. We will intercept them or follow them. Mr. Lucia hesitated for a moment, looking at Javier's serious profile. Why did you come back for me, sir? You could have gone straight home. Javier didn't take his eyes off the road, where raindrops burst against the windshield. Because I saw the videos, Lucia, he confessed, his voice deep and laden with remorse. I saw what you did this morning. I saw Hugo walk, and I saw Olga preparing the drink. Lucia let out the breath she didn't know she was holding. She believed him. Finally, someone believed her. It's a muscle relaxant, Lucia said quickly, pulling the small vial from the glove's finger. I heard her once on the phone. She said something about succinylcholine or something similar that she gets on the black market. She said she kept them calm like dolls. Javier slammed the steering wheel hard. Succinylcholine. That paralyzes the respiratory muscles. That's why Mateo was gurgling. They are suffocating while conscious. Javier pressed the accelerator to the floor. The car became a silver blur under the storm. When they reached the mansion entrance, the red and blue lights of the ambulance were already spinning, reflecting off the stone walls. The main door was wide open. A team of paramedics ran out, pushing 2 small stretchers. Javier slammed the brakes in front of the ambulance, partially blocking the exit. He jumped out of the car before it had completely stopped. Lucia followed him, running in her soaked fabric sneakers. Olga was there by the ambulance's back door, playing the role of a lifetime. She was crying, rubbing her hands, shouting instructions to the paramedics. Cardiac arrest, possible cyanide or rat poisoning, Olga yelled. The employee had access to cleaning poisons. Seeing Javier, Olga ran towards him, trying to hug him. Oh, Don Javier, thank God, it's horrible. Then her eyes locked onto Lucia, who was coming behind him. Olga's expression changed from grief to accusatory fury. You murderer, how dare you come back here? Olga pointed a trembling finger at Lucia, shouting so the police officers who had just arrived would hear. Officers, that is the woman. Arrest her. She poisoned the boys before she was fired. 2 police officers approached Lucia, their hands on their belts. Lucia froze, fear paralyzing her. Back off, Javier bellowed, placing himself between the police and Lucia. His natural authority stopped the officers dead. Nobody touches this woman. Olga blinked, confused. The script wasn't going as planned. But sir, Olga stammered. Shut up, Viper. Javier turned to her with such violence that Olga stepped back 2 paces, bumping against the ambulance. I know what you did. I have it recorded. The color drained from Olga's face faster than the rain. Javier turned to the emergency doctor who was trying to intubate Hugo on the stretcher. The boy was gray, inert. Doctor! Javier shouted. It's not cyanide. It's an overdose of muscle relaxant. The doctor looked up, sweating. Are you sure? The treatment is completely different. If I give him the wrong antidote, I'll kill him. Javier looked at Lucia. Give it to him. Lucia ran to the doctor, dodging Olga, who tried to grab her arm. Lucia shoved the nurse hard, sending her sprawling onto the wet ground, and reached the stretcher. Lucia handed the small glass vial she had kept in the glove to the doctor. This is what that woman was giving them every day. There are a few drops left. The doctor took the vial, smelled it, and looked at Hugo's dilated pupil. It's a neuromuscular blocker, the doctor shouted to his team. They need immediate assisted ventilation and neostigmine. They can't breathe on their own now. The paramedics instantly changed tactics. They stopped chest compressions and started manually pumping oxygen with much more pressure, preparing the lines for the antidote. Load them up. We're going to the hospital on code red, the doctor ordered. Javier climbed into the back of the ambulance, reaching out his hand to Lucia. Are you coming with us? Lucia climbed in, sitting across from him next to Mateo. She took the boy's small, inert hand between hers, rubbing it to give it warmth. Down at the entrance, Olga was trying to get up from the mud, but she found two shadows over her. The police officers, who had heard the exchange, no longer looked at her like a witness. "Where do you think you're going, madam?" asked the officer, pulling out his handcuffs. The ambulance roared away with a shriek of sirens, leaving the corrupt nurse behind, but carrying with it a much more difficult battle, the fight to keep two hearts beating that had been betrayed by the one who should have cared for them. Inside the moving vehicle, Javier watched the monitor. Hugo's line was still erratic. "Don Tyson," Javier whispered, and then looked at Lucia. She had her eyes closed, and her lips were moving in a quick, desperate prayer. "If they make it, Lucia, I swear to you, I will give you whatever you ask for, half my fortune if you want it." Lucia opened her eyes. They were full of tears, but also of an iron resolve. "I don't want your money, Mr. Serrano. I just want them to wake up and see their father there, not a dead nurse." Hugo's monitor let out a long, sharp beep. The line went flat. "Flat line," the paramedic shouted, loading the defibrillator paddles. "Clear." Javier felt his soul leaving his body. Lucia screamed the boy's name, covering her mouth with the yellow glove, now stained with mud and reality. "Charging to 200, the doctor roared. Javier grabbed Lucia's hand. He squeezed it so hard it hurt, but she didn't complain. She returned the grip in that hell of sirens and lights. They were the only two human beings who truly loved those boys. "Come back, Hugo," Javier shouted. "Come back. Clear." Second shock. Silence. And then bip, bip, a beat, weak, solitary. Bip, bip. The rhythm returned, chaotic but present. The doctor slumped back, exhaling. "We got him, but he's very weak. I don't know if the brain damage from the lack of oxygen will be reversible. The next 24 hours will be critical." Javier let out his breath and covered his face, sobbing uncontrollably. Lucia instinctively reached out and touched the millionaire's shoulder, consoling him as if he were another child. The ambulance turned sharply, entering the hospital's emergency ramp. The battle had only just begun. The pediatric intensive care hallway smelled of industrial disinfectant and cold fear, a smell that clung to clothes and skin. Javier Serrano, the man who moved millions with a single phone call, was sitting on a hard plastic chair with his head in his hands, feeling like the poorest and most miserable being on the planet. His Italian designer suit was ruined, stained with mud and rain, and his soaked leather shoes left a dirty puddle on the hospital's immaculate floor. But none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the constant hum of the machines behind the double-frosted glass doors, where a team of 6 specialists fought to reverse the damage he had allowed under his own roof. A few meters away, Lucia remained standing, leaning against the wall. She hadn't sat down. She didn't feel entitled to occupy a space reserved for families. She clutched her bag to her chest, shivering slightly, not from the air conditioning cold, but from the residual shock of adrenaline. Her eyes didn't leave the ICU door. The doors hissed open pneumatically. Dr. Arriaga, head of toxicology and an old acquaintance of Javier's, came out rubbing his red, fatigued eyes. His expression was grave that poker-faced doctors use when the news isn't good, but not fatal yet either. Javier jumped up from his seat, almost tripping over his own feet. "Are they alive?" His voice sounded hoarse, as if he had swallowed glass. "They are stable, Javier, for now," said the doctor, pulling off his mask and letting it hang from one ear. "We managed to neutralize the toxin in their bloodstream. The antidote worked, but we reached the limit." Hugo was clinically dead for almost a minute in the ambulance. Mateo's lungs are very compromised by the respiratory paralysis." Javier felt his knees buckle and had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "What exactly did she give them?" Javier asked, though he feared the answer. Dr. Arriaga sighed and pulled out a metal folder. "Succinylcholine, Javier, and benzodiazepines. It's a brutal cocktail. Succinylcholine paralyzes the skeletal muscles. It's used to intubate patients during surgery so they don't move." But the doctor shook his head in disbelief. She was giving it to them in daily microdoses to keep them weak, simulating atrophy. And today, she gave them a dose to knock out a horse. What your sons have endured is torture, Javier. They were physically paralyzed, unable to move or speak, but their minds were awake. They felt everything, the fear, the immobility, the slow suffocation, everything. Javier closed his eyes, and a dry sob escaped his throat. The image of his sons, prisoners in their own bodies, staring at the ceiling while that woman watched TV beside them, destroyed him. He paid for that. He had financed that torture chamber, believing it was a sanctuary. "I'm a monster," Javier whispered. "I hired her. I left her alone with them. Don't chastise yourself now. You need to be whole, the doctor said, placing a hand on his shoulder. The important thing is the neurological damage. The oxygen deprivation in Hugo. We don't know if he will wake up as the same boy. And their muscles, Javier, they haven't been used correctly for months, maybe years, due to the drug. The atrophy is real now, not from genetics, but from chemical disuse. Recovery will be hell. At that moment, 2 police officers entered the waiting room, breaking the bubble of medical pain. They went directly to Javier. Mr. Serrano, said the senior officer with a serious tone. We have an update on the detainee, Mrs. Olga M. Javier looked up. His eyes, previously full of tears, now burned with icy hatred. What did that witch say? She has partially confessed, said the officer, pulling out a notebook. She admits to administering the drugs, but alleges she did so following your implicit instructions to keep the household quiet. She says the boys were unmanageable, and that you demanded silence for your business. Her lawyer is on his way, and they are going to try to argue it was a misunderstood palliative treatment. Javier let out a bitter laugh. A laugh that scared Lucia in her corner. Instructions from me. Javier approached the policeman, invading his personal space. I want her destroyed. I want you to check every bank account she has. That woman was collecting an executive salary and spending it on luxury bags while drugging 3-year-olds. I don't want a deal. I want her to rot in jail until her teeth fall out. We will do what we can, sir, but we need your formal statement and that of the key witness. All eyes turned to Lucia. She shrank a little, feeling small before the authority. She will not say anything now, Javier interrupted, protecting her. She is exhausted. She just saved my son's lives. Take my statement, but leave her in peace until tomorrow. The officers nodded and retreated to a corner to wait. Dr. Arriaga returned to the PICQ. Javier was left alone in the center of the room, and then slowly turned towards Lucia. She instinctively lowered her gaze, looking at her dirty sneakers. Lucia, Javier said. His voice no longer had the imperious tone of the boss. It was the voice of a broken man. Sir, I'm very sorry about your suit, she mumbled, not knowing what to say. My suit. Javier looked at his expensive, stained clothes and let out a shaky sigh. Let the suit go too. Let the house go, the money, and the company. Lucia, you knew. You saw it in a few days. I lived with them for 2 years, and I didn't see it. How? How could you know? And I didn't. Lucia looked up. Her tired but clear brown eyes met his. Because you were looking at the medical reports, sir. I was looking at the boys, she said with crushing sincerity. You were looking for a cure in papers. I was just looking to get a smile out of them. When you play with a child, you know when they are tired and when they are drugged. Your sons were hungry for life, Mr. Serrano. A dying patient doesn't have that hunger. The words hit Javier harder than any insult. It was the plain, simple truth. He had been a manager father, managing his son's illness, like a failed project, delegating the care to avoid suffering, to avoid getting attached to children he thought would die soon. And in doing so, he almost killed them himself. Forgive me, said Javier. And to the astonishment of a passing nurse, the great magnate Javier Serrano knelt on the hospital floor in front of his former domestic helper. Forgive me for kicking you out. Forgive me for calling you a thief. Forgive me for not believing you. Lucia hurried to crouch down so he would stand up, extremely uncomfortable. No, sir, please stand up. Don't do that. I won't get up until you promise you won't leave, said Javier, grabbing Lucia's hands, those hands rough from the work and hard labor. I need you. They need you. I have no idea how to be a father to children who can live. I don't know what to do. I will stay, Lucia promised softly. I will stay until they are well. Javier nodded, wiping his tears with the back of his dirty hand, and stood up. Just then, a soft alarm sounded inside the unit, and a nurse rushed out. Mr. Serrano, the nurse called. They are waking up, but you have to come. They are very agitated. The awakening was not the cinematic moment of peace Javier expected. It was a chaos of panic and pain. Entering the ICU cubicle, the sound was heartbreaking. Hugo and Mateo were awake, but they were not lucid. They were going through acute withdrawal syndrome, combined with the terror of waking up in an unfamiliar place full of tubes and wires. No, don't poke, don't poke. Mateo screamed with a hoarse, weak voice, trying to pull out the IV line from his arm. Hugo, in the other bed, cried with an agonizing, continuous sound, the noise of a wounded animal. His eyes darted around the room in terror, dilated, searching for a threat. Calm down, Mateo. It's Papa. Javier rushed to Mateo's bed and tried to hold his hand so he wouldn't hurt himself. Everything is fine, son. Papa is here. But Mateo's reaction was devastating. Upon feeling Javier's hands, the boy screamed louder, shrinking back and trying to get away from him. "Go away, bad sir, go away!" The confused child yelled due to the sedation and trauma. To Mateo, Javier was the dark figure who occasionally appeared at the door, the serious man who talked to the white witch, Olga, not a refuge, but part of the threat. Javier froze with his hands in the air. His own son was afraid of him. The rejection was like a physical stab in his stomach. Hugo tried with the other twin. "Hugo, look at me." But Hugo wasn't even looking at him. He was lost in his own nightmare, beating the mattress with his weak fists. The nurses tried to restrain them, but that only increased the children's panic. White coats meant pain, meant injections, meant Olga. "We have to sedate them again," a nurse shouted. "They are going to pull out their central catheters." "Doctor, the blood pressure is rising too much." "No," Javier shouted. "No more drugs, please." "We have no choice. They will hurt themselves," the doctor insisted, loading a syringe. The chaos was total. Alarm beeps, children's screams, medical orders. Javier felt useless, an obstacle to his own son's salvation. Then, a voice cut through the noise. It wasn't a shout, it was a melody. One elephant went out to play. Lucia had entered the cubicle. She wasn't wearing a medical gown. She wore her wrinkled, dirty blue uniform. But in her hands, she wore those ridiculous, bright, wonderful yellow dishwashing gloves. Nobody had told her to come in. She had disobeyed sterile protocol, but nobody dared to stop her. Lucia walked straight to the space between the two beds. She didn't run. She didn't make any sudden movements. She simply raised her gloved hands in the air, wiggling her fingers as if they were the legs of a spider, and continued singing in a sweet, firm voice that trembled only a little from emotion. As he saw that he could not stand it, he went out to call another elephant. The effect was instantaneous, almost magical. Hugo stopped hitting the mattress. His crying stopped dead, turning into a hiccup. His eyes, clouded by tears, focused on the bright yellow color. "Mama, gloves," Hugo sobbed, reaching out a trembling hand towards her. Mateo stopped fighting the nurses. He slumped back onto the pillow, breathing heavily, but his eyes didn't leave Lucia. "Blue girl," Mateo whispered. Javier, kept aside against the wall to avoid obstructing, watched as Lucia approached them. She didn't touch them immediately. First, she made the gloves dance near their faces, tickling their noses without touching skin. A game they knew, a security code that said, "It's me, not the bad nurse. There are no needles here." "Hello to my favorite doctors," Lucia said softly, smiling even though tears were running down her face. "What are you two doing here all alone? Don't you see the spider's web is waiting for you?" It hurts," Mateo groaned, pointing at his arm. "I know, my dear, I know." Lucia moved closer, and with infinite delicacy placed her gloved hand on the boy's forehead, stroking his sweaty hair. "But the blue girl is here, and the magic gloves are going to eat the pain." "Nom, nom, nom." Lucia made a gesture of eating the air around Mateo's arm. The boy let out a small nervous laugh, weak but real. The tension in his shoulders disappeared. The heart monitor that had been beeping wildly began to slow down its rhythm. Bip, bip, bip. "Doctor?" Arriaga lowered the sedative syringe, astonished. "Incredible," the doctor murmured. Her heart rate dropped in 10 seconds. Even morphine doesn't do that so fast. Lucia turned to Hugo, who was looking at her with jealousy, wanting his share of attention. She offered him her other gloved hand to hold. The boy clung to the rubber glove, as if it were a life preserver in the middle of the ocean. "Don't go," Hugo pleaded. "I'm not leaving," Lucia promised. "I'm going to sit here all night, and if any monster comes, I'll give him a pinch with the gloves. Deal." "Deal," the twins whispered almost in unison, closing their eyes, exhausted but no longer terrified. Javier watched the scene from the corner, feeling a devastating mix of relief and jealousy, of gratitude and shame. That woman, a stranger he paid minimum wage to, held his children's hearts in her hands. He was the biological father, the owner of the surname, but in that room, he was the stranger. Lucia, without letting go of the children's hands, looked up and sought out Javier. With an imperceptible nod of her head, she invited him to approach. Javier hesitated. He was afraid of being rejected again, but his love for his sons was stronger than his pride. He slowly approached the other side of Hugo's bed. Lucia leaned a little towards the boy, who was half asleep. "Hugo," she whispered. "Look who came to help me scare away the monsters. It's the big papa. He brought the super-fast car to save us. He is the rescue team's driver. It was a white lie. A way to reintroduce the father into the children's narrative as a hero and not as the absent villain. Javier felt a lump in his throat. She was giving him a place he didn't deserve. Hugo opened one eye and looked at Javier suspiciously. "Fast car?" the boy asked. Javier swallowed his tears and forced a smile, stroking his son's free hand with a finger. "Yes, champ, the fastest car in the world to bring you here with the blue girl." Hugo seemed to consider this. If he had brought Lucia, then he couldn't be so bad after all. "Okay," Hugo whispered, and closed his eyes again. Javier exhaled, feeling a mountain lifted off him. He looked at Lucia across the bed with a gratitude that words couldn't express. She saved his sons twice, first from the poison and now from the hatred. But the peace didn't last long. Dr. Arriaga approached Javier with the results of the first MRIs that had arrived while they were stabilizing them. "Javier, Lucia, I need you to listen to this," the doctor said quietly so as not to wake the boys. "The brain damage seems minimal, thank God, but the legs," he pointed to the images on his tablet. "The muscle atrophy is severe. The tendons have shortened due to lack of use, and the rigid posture in the chairs. Even if there is no more poison, it is very likely they will not be able to walk without surgery and years of painful rehabilitation. Perhaps never walk normally." Javier felt the world crumbling on him again. Lucia, however, didn't let go of the children's hands. She pressed her lips together and looked at the doctor with that same fierce determination she had in the rain. "They will walk," she said in a firm whisper. "They already did it once to play. They will do it again to live. I'll take care of that." The doctor looked at her skeptically, but Javier looked at Lucia, and for the first time in 2 years, he believed. "She will take care of it," Javier repeated, giving Lucia absolute power over her son's recovery. "And I will pay whatever it takes, but she calls the shots." Night fell over the hospital, but in that ICU cubicle, under the watch of yellow cleaning gloves, the real battle began. Not the battle of medicine, but the battle of will. 6 months have passed since the night of the storm, and the Serrano mansion has transformed into something that is neither a home nor a hospital, but a silent, painful battlefield. The Italian designer furniture has been pushed against the walls to make room for parallel bars, high-density foam mats, and electrostimulation machines that cost more than a luxury car. The silence previously imposed by Javier's rules is now broken daily by something much worse: the screams of pain of 2 3-year-olds learning to use their own bodies again. It is Tuesday morning. Dr. Kovacs, an internationally renowned physiotherapist imported from Germany by Javier, is working with Hugo. Kovacs is a large, efficient, and brutally technical man. He doesn't believe in empathy. He believes in biomechanics. "Extend! Come on! Extend!" Kovacs orders with his thick accent, forcing Hugo's right leg to stretch the shortened tendon. Hugo screams. It is a sharp, tear-filled cry of panic that reverberates in the living room walls and pierces Javier's heart as he watches from the study doorway, a coffee cup trembling in his hand. "It hurts him," Javier murmurs, taking a step forward. "Pain is necessary, Mr. Serrano," says Kovacs, without releasing the boy's leg, ignoring the crying. "The muscle is shortened. If we don't break it, it will calcify. If you want him to walk for university, he has to cry now." Matteo, sitting in his wheelchair nearby, cries out of solidarity with his brother, covering his ears with his little hands. "Enough." The voice comes from the kitchen. Lucia appears in the threshold. She wears the blue uniform, but no longer the white apron. Javier has forbidden her from cleaning. Her only job now is to be present. And she is present. She wears the yellow gloves, not for scrubbing, but because they have become the boy's security object. Lucia crosses the room with quick, determined steps, crouches beside the mat, and places her gloved hand on Hugo's knee, right where the therapist is applying pressure. "Let go," says Lucia. Her voice is low, but it has a steel edge that makes the German blink. "Miss, I am in the middle of a clinical session," Kovacs replies with disdain. "Take your rubber hands off my patient." This is science, not a nursery game. The boy is hyperventilating. He is hyperventilating because his body is tense with fear, Lucia counters, pointing to Hugo's chest, which is rising and falling frantically. "If the muscle is tense and you pull, you will tear it. You are not helping, you are breaking him more. And what do you suggest? Dancing?" The therapist scoffs. "Severe atrophy is not cured with songs, girl. It's cured with brute force. Mr. Serrano, control your domestic help, or I'm leaving. My rate is €1,000 an hour, and I don't have time to argue with the nanny." Javier watches the scene, looks at the expert with his imaginary wall of titles in his ego. He looks at Lucia, who is stroking Hugo's hair and whispering things in his ear to make him stop crying. And he looks at his son, clinging to the yellow glove as if it were his life. Javier's business logic tells him Kovacs is right. Progress requires sacrifice. But the father instinct in him, the one that awoke in the ambulance, screams something else. Javier puts down his coffee cup on a table and walks to the center of the room. "You are right, doctor. Kovacs," Javier says. The therapist smiles smugly and returns to grabbing Hugo's leg. Lucia looks at Javier with disappointment, her big eyes full of disbelief. "You are right that your time is valuable," Javier continues, standing right over the German. "So valuable that I won't waste any more of it." "You're fired." Kovacs drops Hugo's leg suddenly. Hugo takes the opportunity to crawl into Lucia's arms. "Excuse me." The therapist stands up, red with anger. "You are kicking me out to leave the treatment in the hands of a maid? Your sons will be crippled. This is medical irresponsibility. I will sue you for breach of contract." "Get out," Javier says with that cold calm. He used to destroy competitors in the boardroom. "And if you ever touch my sons with such roughness again, I'll make sure you won't practice even in Germany or on the moon." Kovacs packs his briefcase furiously, mutters insults in German, and leaves, slamming the door so hard the glass panes rattle. Silence returns to the living room. Only Hugo's heavy breathing can be heard. Javier loosens his tie and sits on the floor directly on the expensive carpet in front of Lucia and the boys. It is the first time he has sat at their level without barriers. "And now what?" Javier asks, looking at Lucia, with a mix of terror and hope. "You were right about one thing, Lucia. Their tendons are short. If we don't stretch, they won't walk. But I can't stand seeing them suffer like this." Lucia finishes drying Hugo's tears with the rubber tip of the glove finger. "We are not going to stop stretching, sir," she says softly. "But we are not going to do it against them. We are going to do it with them. The body doesn't heal if the soul is afraid." Lucia gets up and goes to a closet where toys are kept. She takes out a pile of colorful cushions and some soft, brightly colored resistance bands. "We are going to play rubber jungle," Lucia announces with theatrical enthusiasm. She puts the elastic bands on her own feet and starts walking like a penguin, making faces. The boys, who were crying a minute ago, now look at her with curiosity. "Oh no," Lucia exclaims. "I have my legs stuck with giant chewing gum. I need help. Who is the strongest to help me peel off the gum?" She approaches Hugo and gently ties the elastic band around his little foot, connecting it to hers. "You pull me, and I pull you. If we beat the gum, we get a prize." Hugo, intrigued, starts pulling on her leg. In doing so, he is performing the same extension exercise that Kovacs was forcing, but this time, Hugo controls the force. He decides how much it hurts, and since it's a game, his pain threshold changes. "Harder, Hugo," Javier encourages, understanding the dynamic instantly. He takes off his suit jacket and joins the game, grabbing the other end. "I am the gum monster. You won't beat me." Javier pulls gently, creating the necessary resistance. Hugo laughs, gritting his teeth from the effort, but there are no more tears of panic. There is sweat of effort. "Pull, Mateo!" Hugo shouts to his brother. For the next hour, the mansion fills with laughter. Javier ends up sweating with his shirt crumpled, rolling on the floor. Lucia directs the orchestra, adjusting postures, correcting angles, but always within the narrative of the game. At the end of the session, Hugo has stretched his leg 20 times more than with the German doctor, and he hasn't even noticed. When the boys collapse, exhausted, for their nap, Javier and Lucia remain sitting on the living room floor, exhausted. There is a new intimacy between them, born from shared sweat and small victories. "Thank you," Javier says, looking at his own hands, which for the first time in years have served for something more than signing cheques. "Today I felt like a father." Lucia smiles, taking off her yellow gloves with a sigh of relief. Her real hands are red and marked from the heat of the rubber. "You were always a father, Don Javier," she says. "You were just scared. Fear paralyzes more than any poison." Javier looks at her, really looks at her. He doesn't see the employee. He sees a young woman, beautiful in her simplicity, with a wisdom that no MBA can teach. And he feels something dangerous in his chest, a gratitude that is beginning to transform into something else. "Lucia, about Olga." Javier begins, his tone turning serious. "My lawyer called. I have to go testify tomorrow. They want to implicate me. They say I should have known, and they are right." Lucia places her bare hand on Javier's arm. The skin-to-skin contact is electric, forbidden, and comforting at the same time. "You were blinded by pain over your wife's death and the boy's diagnosis. Olga took advantage of that. Don't let her win in your head. You saved them in the end. That's what counts. Javier nods, but the shadow of guilt doesn't leave so easily. Tomorrow will be a tough day. I need you to stay with them all day. I don't trust anyone else. I'll be here, she promises. Always. But neither of them knows that the legal battle ahead will be as dirty as the poison that ran through the twins' veins, and that Olga, from her cell, still has a card up her sleeve to try to destroy what little remains of the Serrano family. The next morning dawns grey and leaden, an exact reflection of Javier's mood. The Palace of Justice is an imposing stone building surrounded by television cameras. The case of the millionaire and the poisoning nurse has exploded in the sensationalist press, fed by malicious leaks. Javier enters through the back door, flanked by his legal team, but that doesn't stop him from seeing the headlines on the newsstands. Negligent father, or accomplice. The nurse's defense alleges that Serrano ordered his son sedated to travel in peace. It's a lie, a vile and disgusting lie. But public doubt is already sown. Inside the interrogation room, the prosecutor is tough, but Olga's lawyer is a viper. Mr. Serrano, says the defense lawyer, a man with a sharp smile. Is it true that for the last 2 years you spent an average of 150 days out of the country on business? Yes, I have international companies, Javier replies tensely. And is it true that you gave my client, Mrs. Olga, full authority over medical treatments, signing blank checks for pharmacy expenses without asking for detailed receipts? I trusted her. She was a recommended professional. You trusted, or you washed your hands of it, attacks the lawyer, because it looks very convenient. You pay. The boys sleep. You travel. And now that the boys have permanent sequelae, you look for a scapegoat to clear your conscience and your public image. Javier slams his fist on the table, standing up. I didn't know she was poisoning them. I would give my life for them. But you didn't give your time, did you? The lawyer whispers. It had to be a cleaner, with no studies to realize it. What does that say about you as a father? Javier leaves the courthouse hours later, feeling dirtier than ever. The lawyer's words, though legally false, resonate with his internal guilt. What does that say about me as a father? He arrives at the mansion at dusk. It is raining again. It seems it always rains when his soul is in crisis. Upon entering, he expects to find peace, but he finds silence. A dense silence. Lucia! Javier calls, panic rising in his throat. He runs towards the living room. There they are. The scene stops him dead. They are not playing. Hugo and Mateo are sitting on the floor looking at their legs. Lucia is sitting opposite them with her head down, crying silently. What happened? Javier rushes over. Lucia raises her face. Her eyes are red. We tried, sir. We tried to stand up without the bands. And Lucia shakes her head, devastated. Mateo's knees buckled. He fell. He hit his chin. He cried a lot, saying he's useless, that he's broken. Hugo saw that, and now he doesn't even want to move. He says he prefers the chair. He says Olga was right. The sentence hits Javier like a sledgehammer. Olga was right. The psychological poison was still working. The woman was in jail, but her voice was still in the children's heads, telling them they were invalid, that they were fragile. Javier looks at his sons. They are defeated. The spark Lucia had ignited was being extinguished by the harsh reality of gravity and muscle weakness. No, Javier murmurs. He takes off his wet jacket and throws it on the floor. We are not ending the day like this. Javier goes to Mateo, who is touching his chin with a small bruise. Mateo, look at me. The boy doesn't look up. Mateo, Papa is here. I can't, Papa. I'm made of glass. Olga said, I'm made of glass, the boy whispers. Javier feels his heart breaking, but this time, instead of sinking into guilt, he feels a surge of protective fury, not against Olga, but against resignation. He looks at Lucia. She seems to have lost faith for a moment. Exhausted by the pressure of being the only pillar of hope, she needs him to take over. Javier sees the yellow gloves thrown on the floor, where Lucia dropped them after the accident. Without thinking, Javier grabs the gloves. They are small for his large man hands, but he forces his fingers in. The rubber stretches almost to breaking point, but they fit. Now Javier has yellow hands. Attention, recruits! Javier shouts with a voice that makes everyone jump. The boys lift their heads, scared and surprised. They have never seen Papa yell like that, much less with Lucia's gloves on. Lucia also looks at him, her mouth open. The yellow captain has arrived. Javier strikes a ridiculous superhero pose with his hands on his hips. And I heard there's an impossible mission here. They say the floor is lava, and nobody can cross it. Papa, you look silly, Hugo says, with a small smile of disbelief peeking through his tears. Silly? Javier acts offended. I'm aerodynamic. Listen up. Olga was lying. She was a villain. You are not made of glass. You are made of titanium. You are made of iron. But iron is heavy, and that's why it's hard to move. Javier approaches Mateo and kneels. Mateo, you fell. It hurt. I know. But superheroes are not those who don't fall. They are those who get up, and I'm not letting you go. He shows the boy his yellow-gloved hands. These gloves have superpowers, right? Lucia lent them to me. Now I have the power. Mateo hesitates. He looks at his father's hands, transformed by the magic color. You won't let go of me? The boy asks. Never. Even if the world ends, I'll hold you, Javier promises. And it is the truest promise he has made in his life. Mateo stretches out his little hands and grabs Javier's thumbs. Up, soldier. 1, 2, 3. Javier doesn't pull him. He gives him firm, unmovable support. Mateo grinds his teeth. His little legs tremble violently. The fear is there, whispering to him that he will fall, but his father is there, a solid mountain with yellow hands. Mateo pushes, growls, and stands up. He is standing. He trembles like a leaf in the wind, but he is standing. Hugo, come here. Javier calls without letting go of Mateo. Turtle formation. Hugo, seeing his brother standing, feels that mix of envy and courage. He crawls and grabs Javier's trouser leg. Javier lowers one hand, letting go of one of Mateo's, but maintaining his balance with his body. And he pulls Hugo up too. Now he has both of them. A man kneeling, holding up two standing boys. A human tripod of love and pain. Lucia watches from the carpet with her hands over her mouth to stifle a sob of pure emotion. Now, Javier says, sweating from the tension of keeping them stable without forcing them, we are going to take one step towards Lucia. She is the goal. She is the queen of the jungle. Whoever reaches her wins a kiss. It's far, says Mateo. It's only 2 meters, says Javier. But for them, it's 1 kilometer. 1 step, says Javier. I move my foot with you. Javier advances one knee. Mateo tries to move his right foot. The foot drags heavily, clumsily. The heel catches on the carpet. Mateo stumbles. Got you, Javier shouts, holding him firmly before he can fall. The boy doesn't even touch the ground. See? I won't let you fall. Try again. Mateo takes a deep breath. He looks at Lucia, who extends her arms waiting for him like a beacon. Mateo lifts his foot, truly lifts it a centimeter off the floor, and puts it forward. Plop. 1 step. A real, voluntary step. The silence in the room is absolute. I did it! Mateo shouts, surprised at himself. Me too. Hugo, competitive, throws his foot forward, almost stepping on his father, but he moves forward. Javier laughs, and this time his laughter is a clean sound, without bitterness, without guilt. That's it. Come on. It takes them 10 minutes to cover the 2 meters. 10 minutes of sweat, of tremors, of near falls. But they arrive, falling into Lucia's arms like shipwrecked sailors reaching the shore. Javier collapses backwards, lying flat on the carpet, looking up at the high ceiling of his mansion. His arms ache, his back aches, but he feels lighter than ever. Lucia hugs the boys, kissing them frantically. You are my champions. You are my heroes. Then she looks up at Javier, who is still lying on the floor, breathing heavily. And you, Yellow Captain, Lucia says, smiling through her tears. You have earned a kiss too. Javier turns his head and looks at her. In that moment, on the floor of his living room, with his son safe, and this woman looking at him like that, Javier knows the legal battle could destroy him, that the press could attack him, but he has already won the only war that mattered. But as the family celebrates this small miracle, Javier's phone starts vibrating in his jacket pocket. It's a message from his head of security, a short message that will change the course of their recovery. Sir, we found something else in Olga's accounts. She was not acting alone. There are transfers to a Swiss account in the name of a relative of your late wife. The nightmare was not over. Poison had deeper roots than they imagined. The screen of Javier's phone glowed in the study's darkness like an accusing eye. The message from his head of security was brief, but it contained enough poison to destroy what little remained of Javier's faith in humanity. Swiss account headline recipient, Rodrigo Valdez. Javier felt the air leave his lungs. Rodrigo, his brother-in-law, his late wife, Elena's brother, Uncle Rodri, who brought expensive gifts at Christmas and always told Javier, "Don't worry, go close that deal in Tokyo. I'll keep an eye on the boys." Javier dropped the phone onto the mahogany desk. Everything fit with a macabre logic. Elena had left a millionaire trust for the twins, but with a specific clause. If the boys passed away, or were declared permanently incapacitated before the age of 18, the administration of the fortune would pass to her biological family, to Rodrigo. "Damn son of a bitch," Javier whispered, clenching his fists until his knuckles turned white. It wasn't just money, it was blood betrayal. Just then, the intercom at the main entrance sounded, breaking the tense silence of the night. "Mr. Serrano," said the voice of the guard at the outer gate. "Mr. Rodrigo Valdez is here. He says he's coming to see his nephews after seeing the news. He insists on entering." Javier looked at the phone, then at the door. He felt an icy calm, the calm of the predator before the pounce. "Let him in," Javier ordered, "and notify the police to come quietly." 10 minutes later, Rodrigo Valdez entered the main living room. He was an elegant man, dressed in a light linen suit, with that politician's smile that had always fooled Javier. He walked with arrogant confidence, scanning the room, noticing the moved furniture and the rehabilitation machines with a gesture of distaste. Javier was standing by the unlit fireplace waiting for him. He didn't offer his hand. "Javier, for God's sake," Rodrigo said, opening his arms in a gesture of false solidarity. "I saw the news. How horrible, that nurse. How could you let someone like that into the house?" "I told you. You should have let me hire staff, I trust." "Hello, Rodrigo," Javier said flatly. "I came as soon as I could. The family lawyers are worried. They say this looks like criminal negligence on your part." Rodrigo sighed, shaking his head theatrically. And to see this, he pointed to the mats on the floor and the yellow gloves forgotten on a chair. "What is this? A cheap gym, Javier. The boys need a clinic, not floor games." "The boys are getting better," Javier said, taking a step towards him. "Mateo walked today." Rodrigo's smile flickered for a fraction of a second. A nervous tic appeared under his left eye. "He walked," Rodrigo repeated, forcing an incredulous laugh. "Javier, don't fool yourself. The damage from succinylcholine is irreversible. The doctors say so. Don't give them false hope. It's cruel." "How do you know it was succinylcholine, Rodrigo?" Javier asked softly. The silence that followed was dense as lead. Rodrigo froze. The press had talked about sedatives and drugs, but the specific name of the toxin had only been mentioned in the confidential police report and at the hospital. I assumed. It's what they use in these cases, right?" Rodrigo stammered, loosening his shirt collar. "No, it's not usual." Javier took out his phone and projected onto the living room's giant screen the capture of the bank transfer. What is usual is for an uncle to love his nephews. What is not usual is paying a nurse 10,000 euros a month to turn them into vegetables. Rodrigo looked at the screen. His face turned pale, and then red with anger. The good uncle mask fell, revealing the greedy, resentful man underneath. "You never loved them," Rodrigo spat, changing his tone to an aggressive one. "You killed my sister with your absence. She died of stress alone while you bought companies. That money belongs to the Valdez. It's mine by right." "They are your nephews," Javier roared, losing his composure. "You almost killed them. They were better off asleep," Rodrigo shouted, backing towards the door. "Without suffering, without missing a dead mother and an absent father. I was doing them a favor. And you are incompetent. You think this proves anything? It's a transfer to a numbered account. You can't prove it was me." "Olga has already sung, Rodrigo," Javier lied, moving closer to him. "She negotiated a reduced sentence an hour ago. She handed you over on a silver platter." Rodrigo looked around for an exit. His arrogance was crumbling. "You are not going to put me in jail, Javier. I have contacts, and I will take the boys away from you. I will claim you are crazy, that you have a cleaner playing doctor. Social services will take them tomorrow itself. Try it," Javier roared. At that moment, a small figure appeared at the top of the stairs. It was Lucia. She had heard the shouting. She ran down, not like an employee, but like a lioness, protecting her cubs. "Get out of this house," Lucia shouted, standing next to Javier. Rodrigo looked at her with disgust. "Ah, the famous nanny, the one who thinks she cures with dances. Enjoy your moment, dear. Tomorrow those boys will be in a state center under my temporary custody." Rodrigo turned and left the mansion, closing the door with a bang that sounded like a gunshot. Javier stood trembling with rage. Lucia touched his arm. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Can they take them away?" Javier turned to her. He saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear the twins had. "It's my brother-in-law. He has political influence. If he pulls the right strings." Javier didn't finish the sentence. He ran to the landline phone. "I have to call my lawyers. I have to block any judicial order." But Javier knew that bureaucracy was slow and Rodrigo's money was fast. The threat was real. It wasn't about who was right, but about who struck first. That night, nobody slept in the Serrano mansion. Javier spent the hours on the phone shouting at judges and prosecutors. Lucia stayed in the boys' room, sitting on a chair between the two beds, guarding the door with the yellow gloves on, ready to fight against any monster, even one wearing a suit and tie. Dawn brought a cold, gray light, and with it, the sound Javier feared most: sirens. But they were not police cars arresting a criminal. They were official vehicles from the Department of Child Protection, escorted by a local patrol. Javier saw the lights from his study window. They had acted fast, too fast. Rodrigo had kept his threat. "Lucia!" Javier shouted, running towards the stairs. "They are here." Lucia was already awake. She came out of the boys' room, closing the door behind her and blocking it with her own body. "They are not taking them," she said with a terrifying calmness. The doorbell rang insistently. Javier went down and opened it. On the other side was a stern-looking woman with a folder under her arm, accompanied by 2 police officers, and behind them, smiling from his car, Rodrigo. "Mr. Javier Serrano," the woman said, showing an ID. "I am Marta Galdó from Social Services. We have an emergency court order for the temporary custody of the minors, Hugo and Mateo Serrano. We have received credible reports of medical negligence and an unsafe environment." "This is a sham," Javier shouted, blocking the way. "That man back there is the criminal. He paid to poison them." "Those are serious accusations that will be investigated, sir," the social worker said coldly. "But the priority now is the immediate safety of the children. We have reports that you dismissed qualified medical staff and left them in charge of uncertified cleaning personnel. That is negligence. Hand over the children, or the police will have to enter by force." Javier looked at the police officers. Their hands were on their batons. If he resisted physically, he would be arrested, and he would lose the children forever. "They are not unsafe," Javier said desperately. "They are recovering. That will be decided by a state doctor. Step aside." The woman gently pushed Javier and entered the lobby, followed by the officers. Rodrigo got out of the car and entered after them like a vulture smelling carrion. "I only want what's best for my nephews, Javier," Rodrigo whispered as he passed by, smiling. "I told you that you would win." They went upstairs. Javier ran after them. When they reached the upstairs hallway, they found a barrier. Lucia was standing in front of the closed door. She wasn't carrying weapons. She wore her blue uniform and the yellow gloves. "Back," she said. "Miss, move aside." "This is a court order," said the social worker. "Only people who love these boys enter here," Lucia said, without moving an inch. Her eyes shone with tears, but her voice was firm. "You don't know their names. Don't you know Hugo is afraid of the dark and Mateo needs to be sung to sleep? You only bring papers, officers." "Remove her," the woman ordered. One of the police officers advanced and grabbed Lucia's arm to move her aside. She struggled. "No, don't touch them," Lucia screamed. The door behind her opened slowly. Everyone stopped. In the doorway, leaning against the doorframe, stood Hugo. He was standing. His legs were trembling, but he was holding on. He was wearing his superhero pajamas. Behind him, crawling quickly, appeared Mateo, who grabbed Lucia's leg and pushed himself to stand up too. "Let my mama gloves go," Hugo shouted with his sharp little voice. The social worker was gobsmacked. Rodrigo's report said the boys were invalid, unable to move or speak coherently due to their degenerative disease. "But the report says they don't walk," the woman murmured. "The report lies," said Javier, arriving next to Lucia and placing his hands on his son's shoulders. "Look at them." Hugo took a hesitant step towards the police officer holding Lucia. He raised his small hand and pushed the officer's leg. "Bad," the boy said, releasing Lucia immediately, ashamed by the little one's bravery. Rodrigo, from the back of the hallway, turned pale. His alibi of necessary invalidity was crumbling live. "It's a trick!" Rodrigo shouted. "They are forcing them! They are hurting them!" "The only one who hurt them was you," said a grave voice from the stairs. Everyone turned. Dr. Arriaga, the hospital toxicologist, was coming up the stairs, accompanied by 2 federal agents. "Mrs. Galdó," said the doctor, "stop that order. I have certified toxicological evidence proving that the boys were systematically poisoned with drugs bought by this man." Arriaga pointed at Rodrigo. "Lies!" Rodrigo shrieked, backing towards the railing. "We have Olga's confession. The bank records Mr. Serrano sent us last night. And now, the physical evidence," said the federal agent. "Mr. Rodrigo Valdez, you are under arrest for attempted homicide, fraud, and conspiracy." Rodrigo tried to run, pushing Javier to go downstairs, But Javier, driven by years of contained fury, grabbed him by the lapel of his suit. "You are not running," Javier growled, face to face with him. "You are going to watch them. You are going to watch the boys you tried to break." Javier turned Rodrigo towards the twins. Hugo and Mateo were standing, clinging to Lucia's legs. They were weak, yes, but they were alive. They were standing, and they looked at him, not with fear, but with the victory of survivors. "Look closely, Rodrigo," said Javier, "because it's the last time you'll see them outside a cell." Javier pushed Rodrigo towards the federal agents, who immediately handcuffed him. The good uncle was dragged downstairs, shouting threats that nobody heard anymore. The social worker, visibly shocked, closed her folder. "Mr. Serrano," she said, looking at the boys and then at Lucia. "It seems there has been a terrible error in our evaluation. I apologize. Clearly, these children are in the best possible hands." The woman signaled the local police, and they withdrew, leaving the house in silence. The silence lasted a second, and then broke. "Papa won!" Mateo shouted, letting go of Lucia and taking 2 stumbling steps towards Javier. Javier knelt down and received the impact of the 2 small bodies throwing themselves at him. He hugged them with such force that he thought his ribs would break, crying openly in the hallway. Lucia remained standing by the door, smiling, slowly taking off her yellow gloves. Her protective duty was over. The real danger had passed. Javier looked up and saw her from the floor, surrounded by his sons. "Don't take the gloves off yet," Javier said with a tired but radiant smile. "We still have to rebuild many things, and I can't do it without you." Lucia walked over and knelt down with them, completing the circle. "I'm not going anywhere, Captain," she said. The 4 of them remained there on the hallway floor as the morning sun finally broke through the storm clouds and entered through the window, illuminating a house that, for the first time in years, was beginning to feel like a home. But the story didn't end here. The final, definitive step towards the future remained. The twins' birthday was approaching, and Javier had a surprise prepared that would close the cycle of pain forever. And 6 months have passed since the police took Rodrigo away, and the silence of the Serrano mansion has been replaced by the noise of life. Today, the spring sun bathes the immense back garden of the property, where a giant white tent has been set up. This is not a business reception. There are no investors in gray suits or nurses with hidden syringes. There are balloons, hundreds of colorful balloons, and curiously, most of them are yellow. Javier Serrano adjusts his tie knot in front of his bedroom mirror. His hands, which used to sign dismissals without trembling, are now sweating. Today is Hugo and Mateo's 4th birthday, but it is much more than that. It is their official presentation to the world after the scandal. The press is outside, controlled, but present. Society, that same elite that whispered that the boys were permanently disabled, is waiting to see if the Serrano miracle is real or just another publicity stunt. "Nervous, Captain?" says a soft voice from the door. Javier turns. Lucia is there, but she is no longer wearing the blue uniform. Today she wears a simple cream-colored dress that highlights her skin, tanned from afternoons of playing in the garden. Her hair, usually pulled back in a strict work bun, falls loosely over her shoulders. Javier feels like he can't breathe, and it's not because of the tie knot. "I'm scared, Lucia," Javier confesses, sinking onto the edge of the bed. "What if they fall? There are 100 people out there waiting to see them fail, waiting to see the sequelae of the poison to say, 'Poor things.' I don't want them to feel pity for my sons." Lucia enters the room and stands in front of him, with that natural authority that has governed the house for the past few months. She adjusts his shirt collar. "They will fall, Javier," she says with a calm smile. "They are boys. Boys fall when they run, but they get up. They are no longer afraid of the floor because they know the floor is not lava, and they know their father is there to applaud, not to scold. I don't know what I would have done without you these past 6 months," Javier whispers, looking her in the eyes. "Remember the sleepless nights, the screams of frustration during rehabilitation, and how she turned every tear into a game. Did you save this family? No, sir. We saved it. You stopped being the millionaire and became the papa. That's what cured them." Javier takes Lucia's hand. She is not wearing gloves today. Her skin is warm. "Lucia, about your contract." Javier begins, his heart racing. "You're going to fire me again," she jokes. "I want to tear it up. I don't want you to be my employee. I don't want to pay you a salary to love my sons. I want—" Javier stops. He is an expert negotiator, but this is the most important deal of his life. "I want you to be here for another reason." Lucia squeezes his hand gently. "First the party, Captain. The soldiers are waiting for us." Then we talk about contracts. Down in the garden, it's a frenzy. Guests are drinking champagne and glancing sideways at the terrace. There is a constant murmur. They say the neurological damage was severe, comments a lady with an excessive hat. It's impossible for them to recover from the succinylcholine in such a short time. They'll surely bring them in decorated wheelchairs. Suddenly, the background music stops. An expectant silence falls over the crowd. Javier steps out onto the terrace and takes the microphone. He has no prepared notes. He speaks from the scar the fear left on him. "Welcome," Javier says. His voice rings out clearly. "Thank you for coming to Hugo and Mateo's birthday. I know what many of you think. I know what has been said. That I was an absent father. It is true that I trusted the wrong people. It is true. But today we are not here to talk about the past, nor about medical miracles. We are here to celebrate effort." Javier leaves the microphone on the lectern and walks down the terrace, steps onto the lawn. He turns towards the open door of the mansion. "Ready or not?" "Here I come," Javier shouts, not as a host, but as the tickle monster. And then it happens. They don't come out walking, they burst out running. Hugo and Mateo erupt onto the terrace like two cannonballs dressed in miniature linen suits. There are no wheelchairs, no walkers, no nurses holding them. They run. It is a clumsy run, yes. Their legs still have a slight stiffness, a memory of the muscle damage. Sometimes one foot drags a bit more than the other, but they run with wild joy, laughing out loud. The crowd stifles a collective gasp. Mateo, in his excitement, trips on the final step. Silence cuts the air. The lady with the hat covers her mouth, expecting tears, drama. But Mateo doesn't cry. He rolls on the grass, gets his expensive suit covered in green, and jumps up. "I'm a bowling ball!" the boy shouts, raising his arms. "Attack!" Hugo shouts, jumping onto his brother. Javier catches both of them in the air, spinning with them, deliberately falling to the ground to be buried under his son's laughter. Lucia watches from the terrace railing, crying, but these are sweet tears of a mission accomplished. She sees the guests, those who came for the morbid curiosity, now genuinely smiling. Some are even moved. The twins' vitality is contagious. They have conquered death, they have conquered betrayal, and they have done it by playing. The party continues and turns into something high society had never seen. Javier organizes sack races. He himself participates, ruining another $3,000 suit, but earning the absolute respect of his sons. At dusk, when the boys are exhausted, sitting on a blanket eating cake with their hands, another rule broken by the new management, Javier looks for Lucia. She is tidying up some empty plates out of sheer habit. "Stop that," Javier says, taking the plate from her. "There are waiters for that. Come with me." He leads her to a secluded corner of the garden under a jasmine-covered pergola. There, on a small table, is a gift box wrapped in gold paper. "I told you I wanted to talk about your contract," Javier says, turning serious. Lucia looks at the box. "Sir, I don't need gifts. Seeing them run today was enough. Open it." Lucia unties the ribbon with trembling fingers. She opens the box. Inside, on a blue velvet cushion, is a silver picture frame, but there is no photograph. Pressed and preserved behind the glass is a yellow rubber glove, a simple supermarket cleaning glove. Underneath, a small engraved plaque. It reads, "The hand that held our world when it was falling." Lucia covers her mouth, sobbing. It is the strangest and most beautiful gift she has ever received. "That glove is worth more than this whole house," Javier says, moving closer to her. "Because with that glove, you taught me how to be a father. You taught me that love is not paying for the best clinics, but being there on the floor, getting dirty." Javier reaches into his pocket and pulls out something smaller. It's not a ring yet. It's too soon, and he knows it. It's a key, an old iron key. "This is the key to the country house by the coast," Javier says. "The doctors say the sea air and swimming will help their legs get 100% stronger. I want to take them there all summer, but I won't go if you don't." "Not as a nanny, not as an employee." Lucia looks at him with shining eyes. "Then how?" "As part of the family, as the woman." Javier swallows, completely vulnerable. "As the woman who has given me my life back too. I have fallen in love with you, Lucia. I don't know if it's appropriate. I don't know if it's too fast, but it's the truth. And in this house, we don't tell lies anymore." Lucia looks at the framed glove, then at the key, and finally at Javier. She sees the man behind the millionaire, the man who learned to play. "Javier," she says, using his first name for the first time without the don. "I fell in love with you the day you put on the yellow gloves and knelt on the carpet." Javier smiles, a smile that reaches his eyes. He leans down and kisses her. It is a kiss under the orange light of dusk, with the background sound of his sons arguing over who ate more cake. It is the kiss of two survivors who have found their home in each other. Papa, Lucia. Hugo's shout breaks the romantic moment. The two separate, laughing. The twins run towards them with faces stained with chocolate. Mateo says he's faster. But I'm faster, Hugo complains. Liar, Mateo yells. I have turbo on my feet. Javier lifts Mateo, and Lucia lifts Hugo. Well, we'll have to check that at the beach, Javier says, winking at Lucia. Beach? Ask the two at once, their eyes wide as saucers. Yes, we are all going tomorrow, Lucia says, kissing Hugo's sticky cheek. Night falls over the mansion. The guests are gone. Silence returns, but it is no longer a cold silence. It is the silence of peace. In the main living room, above the fireplace, where an pretentious abstract painting by a famous artist used to hang, the frame with the yellow glove now rests. Javier passes it before going up to sleep. He stops for a moment and looks at the glove. He thinks of Olga rotting in a cell paying for her greed. He thinks of Rodrigo, ruined and forgotten. And then he thinks of Lucia, who is upstairs reading a story to his sons. Javier turns off the living room light. Thank you, he whispers to the void. Or perhaps to God. Or perhaps simply to the luck of having found a girl with yellow gloves at the exact right moment. He takes the stairs two at a time. There is no more fear, no more poison, only the future. And for the first time in a long time, Javier Serrano is in a hurry to see what tomorrow brings. The end.